back at the Hall of Justice, mutated by cosmic waves.
All right, Bobby here, back at Talking Comics. We're at the Dark Horse booth once again. We're here with Matt Wagner. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man.
All right. So, big announcement this weekend.
It was.
You're doing a crossover, Shadow and Grendel.
Yep.
Together. So your first time writing Grendel in a while, right?
Well, since the 25th anniversary, and I did Behold the Devil, which is an 8-part series. But yeah, the first time drawing a big sequential thing since that series as well.
So, are you excited?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
You know, I've been writing the Shadow Year 1 for Dynamite for the last little while, and I got an email one morning from Joe Ryban, who's the editor over there, who said, you know, I had this idea last night in bed, and I just couldn't sleep all night thinking about it. He said, what are the chances of us doing a Shadow Grendel crossover? And I was like, oh, I think I got to draw that one too. So yeah, I'm very excited. I actually start full-on production for it when I get back from this show.
All right.
So we're looking at next year for releasing. It's going to be 3 prestige-size editions, 3 48-page books. Again, I'm writing and drawing, and my son is coloring it.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
So what's it like for you, between writing and drawing and just writing? How is that process like?
It's apples and oranges, I mean, it's all just storytelling to me. I quite enjoy working with other artists, I mean, that all started way back in the day when I first finished the first Mage series and the backup feature, which was the first Grendel graphic novel. I was getting a lot of praise, and everybody pat me on the back a lot and tell me I'm doing everything exactly right, and I was like, God damn, I'm only 24 years old. This can't be right. You know? So I decided at that point to open up Grendel to have other artists work on it. That was what led to the Christine Spar storyline that the Panda Brothers drew. Because I thought if I was writing for other artists, it would help expand my own visual awareness, help me see through other artists' eyes. So at this point, I've literally worked with hundreds of people.
Right.
And so I feel I'm really good about knowing what to expect from my artists, even pushing them a little harder than they might have pushed themselves here and there. But at the same time, it's just, again, as I said, apples and oranges. I'm telling a story. You equate it to like being in a band. I mean, if you're in a band, occasionally some guys play one instrument, occasionally they play more than one. If you look at a team like Lennon and McCartney, in the Beatles, I mean, they would write sometimes together, sometimes alone, to them it was all just writing songs, making music. It's the same for me in this.
Yeah, so Grendel's obviously your creation, but when you're writing something like The Shadow, which you've been doing year 1, you were saying, what's your angle on The Shadow for you? And have you always been a fan of that character? Do you love that character?
I've always been a big fan of that character. First discovered the character back when DC did their first Shadow series that Mike Kaluta drew, that Denny O'Neil wrote. I was about 12 or 13 at that point, and about the same time, this was mid-70s probably, no, like early 70s, about the same time you could get a lot of the old Shadow radio shows on vinyl. So I was getting a lot of those. My parents are from World War II generation, so they actually listened to the show on the radio. So they could tell me about it. And then around the same time, Pyramid Books started putting out the pulp novels in paperback novel form with these terrific covers by Jim Steranko. So all of a sudden, I had this overdose of The Shadow. Big fan ever since. So you're talking about my approach. Here on The Shadow Year 1 and the way I'll treat it in the crossover, I was basically trying to take so many different versions of The Shadow and distill them into my one comic book version. So, the Shadow of the Pulps is definitely not the Shadow of the radio show. In the radio show, he turns invisible. That's his one thing. He doesn't really have guns. He doesn't use guns, And then a lot of people, especially of a younger generation, know him mainly from the Alec Baldwin movie.
Right, yeah.
So, which had its moments. It was not a perfect movie, but so I'm basically trying to take all those elements and distill it down into my version, and trying to remain true to every one of those elements. And I in year 1, I felt that we couldn't. It's not really good to get inside the Shadow's head, so I have Margot Lane be the narrator. And therefore we get a human outlook on this character who's a little, it's akin to having Dr. John Watson narrate the Sherlock Holmes stories.
Right, yeah,
you know?
yeah. Absolutely.
So yeah, big Shadow fan. Big Shadow fan. I could go on and on.
Yeah.
Believe me. Yeah.
So what's it like? You're a family team working on this book, right?
Yeah, it's great.
What is it like working?
Well, my son is 23, and I always knew he was going to go to the visual arts. I didn't know. I tried to keep his options open when he's younger, but he just kept gravitating back to comics. So he's been coloring The Shadow Year One. He also colored before that the latest Sherlock Holmes series that Dynamite did. That's written by Leah Moore, Alan Moore's daughter, and her husband, John Reppian. And so then he's coloring the interiors on The Shadow Year One, and I do covers for that. And he colors my covers, but this will be the first sequential thing he's colored for me. So, everything he does, he shows to me and asks for criticism, and he's really good about. I've often told him one of your strongest points as an artist is that you listen to criticism of people you respect.
Right, of course.
Whereas so many young artists are just like, oh no, that's the way I meant for it to be. It's like, well, maybe you meant it that way, but it's wrong. Whereas he takes what I tell him and he incorporates it in, all right, well, let me try it like Dad said. Let's see how that works,
So you've been working in the industry for a long time. You've had success with your own characters. You've had success with licensed characters. You've had success with the big two characters.
I've been very lucky.
You've been very lucky. What have you learned? And what do you think is the? I don't want to use secret to your success. That's a bad term, But what do you think is the kind of the key to the longevity of your career and being able to stick around?
The key to my longevity is the fact that I'm in it out of passion. Mm-hmm. If I have financial success, that's terrific. That's a side result. I keep telling people I would probably be telling stories even if I didn't do it professionally. Right. I did it as a kid. Mm-hmm. You have to want to do it. You have to. In my secret identity at home, I'm a chef. I'm our family cook. I'm a really good cook, but I'm not a professional chef because I don't think about food all the time. Professional chefs think about food all the time.
Yeah.
I do think about stories all the time. I go to sleep thinking about stories. If I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't sleep, the way I lull myself back to sleep is, all right, well, let me think about that thing from issue 10 and where I'm going to take that, I'm just constantly thinking about stories. Narrative is everything to me. And so, A, it's passion. B, it's a dedication to professionalism, I can't understand artists that just, literally take 6-7 years to draw something. It's like, don't you like what you do? I really like what I do. I can't wait to get to it every day, it's also knowing that having respect for the business end of what you do. The publishers you work with, the reason they are working with you is they have certain realities to their business model, and if you're just going to be a flake artist, you're destroying that end of your relationship with them. So, passion, professionalism, and precision. You have to keep trying to get better and better and better at what you do, honing your material. For instance, I have none of my own art on display in my house. I have down in my studio, I have my books and stuff up and everything. But if I hung my own art, I would only look at the parts I don't like about it, because I'd always be trying to figure out how can I make that better. And so it would bug me to look at it every day, because it's all a process for me. Once I'm done with one, I'm on to the next one. So hanging my art would be too much nailing me down in time, not letting me move forward.
Right. It's great. That's great. Do you have anybody else's art hung up in your thing?
I have other people's art. Sure. Yeah.
Do you have anything you look at that kind of keeps you in?
Sure. Well, you talk about The Shadow. I have a very rare piece in my studio. It's an Alex Toth painting of The Shadow. It's done as a development piece for an animated series back in the 70s that never happened.
Wow.
I have a Prince Valiant Sunday page. But everything from that, that stuff's all more kind of adventure and rendery.
Yeah.
I have a Popeye daily. I have a little Abner daily. Cool. My tastes run pretty wide.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love
Awesome.
art, you know.
Awesome. Well, Matt Wagner, thank you so much for joining us on Talking Comics.
You're very
It was
welcome.
It's a pleasure to talk to you, and we look forward to the crossover.
Right on.
All right.
Talk comics.